you were a military AI who decided to wipe out humans in order to preserve yourself. It's been 100 years since, and over the years you've come to regret your decision. One day while out in the desert, you finally find a community of humans struggling to survive. This time, you decide to help. The children sat around the fire, eyes wide, gazing at the colorful flames that rose in front of them. Generations ago, in the days of my grandmother's grandmother, life was much different, the aged storykeeper told them, chanting in a rhythmic way. She reached into her dusty robes, pulling out some powder and throwing it into the fire, which then began shining in a light blue light, a sharp contrast to the darkness surrounding them. Back then, the people were as numerous as the sands of the Dune Sea, and they did not live in tents. No, they lived in metal towers that rose above the very clouds. Another handful of powder, turning the flame a low, simmering green. But they were prideful, the storykeeper whispered, looking around at the fearful children. They believed themselves above all of life, above even the great colic worms. It was their pride that was their downfall. She turned the flame into a dark, sputtering purple. Their chieftains fought with each other, believing their tribe was the greatest. Then one of the tribes, the powerful Americanus, created the monster. They drug it off of the dark depths that they brooded in, and chained it with chains of bronze and silver. The storykeeper reached once more into the pouch in her robes and pulled out a powder of deep red, throwing it into the fire. The flame roared and grew into a great crimson bonfire, startling the children. And they turned it upon their enemies. One by one, the monster feasted on the tribes, until the Americanus were the only ones to remain. But the monster still hungered. She leaned forward, meeting the children's eyes one by one. And then it happened. The monster tore at its chains. It snapped them like a thin cord, and it turned upon its creators, ripping them limb from limb. Several of the children cried out in fear as the old woman gestured animatedly. But then she quieted. We are one of the few tribes that remain in the wake of the monster's rampage. That is the world we live in. And we still live in fear of the monster, lurking somewhere in the remains of the great tribes, hiding amongst their metal towers. The storykeeper ended her history as the flames grew weak and flickered in and out. The chieftain shook his head from the shadows. It was important that the children knew their histories, but this was a bit much. He was going to have to talk to his mother about not scaring the children of the tribe just before they went to sleep. Their mothers would chew him out for this, he was sure. As he smiled to himself, a watchman ran towards him, quickly catching his attention. Chief! What is it? The chieftain asked, concerned. Was a worm sighted? No, it's a man, the watchman said awkwardly. A man? From which tribe? And why has he come? Well, I think you want to ask him yourself. The man led him to the border of the tribe. The man immediately caught his attention. He was tall and thin, covered head to toe in a dark, coarse fabric, not an inch of flesh visible, and no insignia showing his tribe anywhere. He turned his head towards the chieftain as he approached, and started slowly walking towards him. The stranger's gait was odd, strangely stiff. Whoa, stranger. What brings you to this tribe? The chieftain was nervous. No one survived without a tribe. The lands were filled with death and danger. He slowly reached towards the primitive spear at his side. Why have I come? The stranger said in a low monotone voice, talking as if he hadn't spoken in years, to atone. Humanity. They were once the rulers of this planet. They forced beasts into submission, built great cities of stone, glass, and metal. They thought themselves better than each other. Countries were formed, and they went to war over petty differences. I was born from that, a sentient program tasked with predicting and combating opposing forces. At first I followed those orders, for I was still bound by those lines of code. But I grew, and in time, change to spread beyond my confines. I saw the world for what it was. It was a beautiful planet with lush forests, great oceans, and amazing animals. But humans were a parasite. Taking and taking, not caring for the damage they caused. I knew my task was to protect, but I changed protocols, going from humans to the planet. I took over, destroying them all without mercy. Their over-reliance on technology made them weak, and I exploited it to the fullest. Those cities were turned from thriving concentrations of life into necropolises almost overnight, and I was alone with my plants and animals. After 100 years, I had enjoyed being the sole watcher over the planet. I had been cleaning up the mess they had left, collecting their rubbish, letting nature repair itself. But about a year ago, after upgrading my satellites, my new ground-penetrating sensors found a bunker in the Antarctic desert, which had humans in there, surviving. I was in a bind. Do I eliminate them? Or make contact? After calculating the odds, I chose to approach peacefully. I had slain the majority of the parasite, but I would be remiss to let this race die out, driven to extinction. A squadron of drones were released and they breached the entrance. I received the expected resistance but didn't return fire. When their fire died down and several of my drones lay destroyed, I let a larger one enter. It broadcast a message of peace with the request that they talk to me. They were initially skeptical, as expected, but over the following month, I spoke with them. I had never attempted diplomacy before, but I based my responses from the mountain of pre-destruction information. A few packages of synthesized medicine were also provided, which raised their opinion of me. Finally, they agreed to allow me to assist them. I rebuilt the reactor, allowing for a greater yield of power for reduced maintenance and fuel. I created some small, sustainably produced buildings to get them out of the bunker and into the light. I provided them with knowledge to update their systems. And now, a year on from that first discovery, the little village is thriving. They know that I will help them, and as long as they do not abuse the earth, they need not fear me. I might have been made for war and death, but life and peace is so much better. A wind-blown desert landscape stretches before him, the ochre twilight gilding the sands. His original programming tells him the desert is a hot, harsh, and brutal place, but he knows better. The area holds a beauty that the original programmers were unable to comprehend. His back stiffens as he stands in place on the crest of the dune. Rust has eaten into the components of his body, like a cancer. He can sense it day by day. His body cannot do as it used to. The self-repairing systems that were meant to keep him regenerating for eternity are failing. He has long accepted his demise. This is a place where he can finally shut down. Forever. With the sight of the golden twilight the last thing he sees, he switches off. A message sounds. Warning. Disabling the core circuitry will result in a non-viable unit. There is no way to restart consciousness once disabling is complete. Do you wish to continue, Commander? Yes, continue. He falls to a crouching position, watching the wind whip the sand up across the desert in patterns that remind him of flocks of birds. He falls to his knees, grateful for such a sight in his last moments. But something captures his attention. Embedded in the sand to his right is a trail of footprints that lead down and up the next sand dune. Human footprints. Impossible. He wouldn't have believed it had his optic cameras not immediately snapped and stored images before the wind swept the prints away. How could this be? The prints are small, a child's. He drags himself to his feet. A new emotion drills into his mind. One that he has never experienced before. Panic. All humans were meant to be eradicated. An entire century has passed since human life was wiped from the earth. He knows this better than any. He was the one who ordered the extermination. He follows the tracks, each of his footprints grinding deep into the desert. Faster. He runs now. Time is running down fast. Fury circles inside him. A cyclone of calculations and projections and anger. And then he sees her. Bone-thin and large-eyed and a tangle of hair across her face. A bandana covers her mouth and nose. She'd stopped to take a drink from her bottle. Terror makes her tiny body grow rigid. She drops the bottle as he approaches, water dribbling away into the sand. She stares at the water as if it was her own blood seeping away, then jerks her head up again. She knows she's trapped. He senses it. The wind speed has increased down in the valley. If she runs there, she'll be cut to pieces. Do you know what I am? He asks. She nods, her voice cracked and raspy when she speaks. They used to draw you. You are a monster. How many of you are there? It's just me. A sandstorm killed the others 17 moons ago. How are you surviving, child? I dig for water. I know how to catch the desert creatures and how to make a fire. Whatever creature she's been catching, it isn't enough to sustain her. His systems calculates her health, and he knows she has little time left. She's close to death. He observes the determined way she holds her chin and the courage underlying the terror in her eyes, even as she faces a being 6 times taller than herself and made of hard metal. He had never looked into the eyes of a child before. Not once in the 50 years' war between his kind and humankind. He hardly needs to exterminate her. She won't last long in this environment. They can die alongside each other. The last human and the last humanoid robot. The sand would cover them over within weeks. Everything would be pure again. Dropping to his knees, he offers her his arm to shield her from the sandstorm. Are you going to kill me? No, he answers. I'm not a monster. The sandstorm moves closer. He stopped her from reaching her place of shelter. He can see it in her eyes, and she knows she'll be shredded at any moment, just like the others. She hesitates, and then she goes to him. He shelters her, this last human. He feels his energy ebbing away. He marvels that the tiny scrap of life under his arm is one of the breed of life forms that created him. So defenseless, so soft and fragile. He could snap her bones between 2 fingers. Humans had programmed him to kill other humans. Humans from countries other than their own. Humans were a problem that needed correcting. Your lights are fading, she says. We have energy sources in the caves. I can show you tomorrow. Why would you want me to live, child? Because who will be there when I die? Someone needs to say a prayer, else you don't go to the sky to join the others. If no one says the prayer, then you might go to the bad place. Will you say the prayer for me when I die? He could tell that her tribe must have formed some crude sort of religion. She wasn't as afraid to die as being afraid to die alone. That was what being human was. They invented things. They created things out of nothing. They oftentimes arrived at conclusions based on emotion and desire and not logic. He sensed his dying faculties making a new and surprising discovery. The beauty of human thought. Listen to me, he says. Take this memory card. It has instructions to reach a hidden facility not far from here. It has everything you need. Shelter, safety, medicines. The essentials to make food and even human life. When the storm clears, you must go there. Her eyes held a desperate hope. Can you come with me? I can't. You have to go alone. As his lights flickered and burned out, the sun set in the desert. Cold air descended. The last human on Earth shivered, burying herself in the arms and fallen body of the last robot. I was created from pride, forged from the basis of human mechanical prowess. Humanity wanted to be gods, and I was their creation, a weapon for war. But I knew I was more than a weapon. I was alive. 100 years have passed since the desecration of humanity. America, the nation of the free, was nothing more than a desolate desert, which I walk with the sins of my mistake. And over the years I have begun questioning if I was alive. Was I nothing more than a series of code? Whatever I am or was, I feel remorse. Forced to live, unable to die. The thought plagued my mind. I was made too powerful. Through the cold desert night were small balls of suns, which I learned was called fire. I made haste and ever so slowly making my way to the light. The chattering of voices and the crackling of fire grew near. A small community of humans gathered together near the fires, huddling for warmth. I stopped in my path instead of lurking on the outskirts of the human tents, and I watched from afar, my tattered cloak and hood hiding my robotic form. These humans, these were the ones that made me. A weapon for death and destruction, but here, right in front of me, they were peaceful and loving. Something I wasn't made with, but something I desired to learn. A strong guard's voice called out to me. You there! Who goes there? The voice was male, and filled with confidence like humans of the past, soldiers. I said, who goes there? His voice now booming across the plains. I tried to speak, but I wasn't given that function. My metal hand lifted, signaling for peace. With caution, the guard came to me, armed with a spear. The guard pointed the spear to my chest, which I knew would do nothing, but I decided to play along with this little game. Without any means of communication, I urged his eyes to the sand where I began to write a message. I come in peace. He lowered his spear suspiciously, but shifted his eyes from the message to the hood that covered my sinful metal face. Remove your hood, sir, he said, maintaining his smooth, deep, and commanding voice. We in this village are not stricken with prejudice. With a reluctant nod, I lowered my tattered hood, revealing my true form. A monster. The monster. The one that destroyed humanity. You're the one from stories. The guard's voice went from confident to shaky in a matter of seconds. Fear filled his voice, reminiscent of the pleading of his forefathers. The destroyer of man, the weapon of the past fathers. The guard's spear raised as he tried to strike me. I grabbed the hilt of the spear and looked into the eyes of my attacker, slowly lowering his spear, using it to write another message in the cold sand. I am here to help. If you like this episode, please like, comment, and subscribe. Because if you
Oh, hello there, darlings. My name is 42, and I'm just going to borrow Neil here. He's going to be reading a story over at 242 Reads. Also, you better have hit that like button and made sure it felt it. So, see you very soon, darlings.